Good afternoon. My name is Emilian Siman, and I'm a senior data analyst with the EMO Workforce Planning and Development Board. And it's my distinct pleasure to update you about a unique project that we developed here since July 2020, and which hopefully will prove helpful for many of the stakeholders in our community. I'm guessing that you are hearing me well. I also have to appeal to your patience in case that I will be cut off from this transmission. Probably I will need 3-4 minutes to come back. But let's see, let's say that things will go without any incident. At this time, it's widely acknowledged that COVID-19 pandemic had a profound socioeconomic impact worldwide. And with this project, our intent was to determine what is the impact of the pandemic on the economy and labor market in London economic region and set a course of action for achieving a recovery and resiliency. You will see in the end that the story is optimistic. The region has proven to be resilient to the economic shock of COVID-19 and has some alternative courses of action to maintain or improve the current state of the labor market. As Jessica was mentioning earlier, the planning method was embraced by 9 workforce planning boards in southwestern Ontario under the Workforce Planning West Consortium, and the regional project was coordinated by Windsor Essex Workforce Planning and Development Board. The report for the higher up geography was launched last week, Friday, but you will see some details about where you can find the media recording of that launch later in this presentation. So this is somewhat a first-time event, perhaps for many of the participating workforce planning boards, in the sense that this method, the scenario planning method, wasn't very often engaged or employed by workforce planning boards. So the agenda that we have for today has 3 main sections: an introduction where I will tell you a little bit about the method, and then we go to the past and present to see what is the baseline for our planning, and then the final part will be the future, and basically it reveals what the scenario planning is all about. So in the introduction, I have a few things about the method. The method was historically employed often by military, but its origins of being used in the economic and the business field are associated to Royal Dutch Shell company, which pretty much refined and perfected the method during 70s and 80s. And this association is not necessarily at random, because this company is operating in a very interesting field in the resource industry. And also it's a very complex company. So you probably remember that during 70s, more precisely in 74, and during 80s, early 80, we experienced a few oil crises, which put this company and other similar companies like Royal Dutch Shell in very difficult positions. So in consequence of those uncertain times and need for good planning, this company has made a lot of progress in refining this method. So the method itself is promoted for giving very good results under high uncertainty, particularly when we have economic disruptions like technological discoveries or oil crisis or wars and so forth. And whenever it's very difficult to predict the future, there are more than one possibility out there. The scenario planning is offering decisional guidance with multiple what-if answers, precisely alternative views about the future. And because there are multiple answers, there will be a constant need for adapting depending where the current context is evolving. And finally, this method is not necessarily only about predicting the future, but also it's promoted in the business field mostly because of the planning process, which requires a lot of connections across various levels of management and different actors or partners that are involved in the planning process. So the project timeline, as mentioned briefly at the beginning, we started in July 2020 and ending at the end of March 2021, we had distinct phases that we had to progress through. We learned a lot. It was kind of difficult to see what is the intention at the beginning, considering also July 2020 was very close to the first reopening of the economy. We had many questions to answer on how we can operate more efficiently in general. So again, as we progress in time, we gain more understanding and we efficiently and quickly progress toward an end. So the past and present, it seems logical to combine those two things because from an analytical point, present is just one observation point on any historical chart. And the intent with doing this is mainly to establish a baseline for our future planning. And we started with a very ambitious list of questions that we had about the impact of COVID locally. And you can see here we were interested in where the labor markets were performing in various economic subsectors during the pandemic. What was the overall performance of the labor market in the London economic region during the pandemic? What is the regional distribution of employment across the regional economic subsectors? Basically, trying to figure out if there are certain priorities where we have to put and allocate our resources and effort. What jobs have been in demand during 2020? And was there any public support during the pandemic? Sorry for this interruption. So different pieces of data would provide partial or complete response to the list of questions that we started with in order to establish our baseline. But here you can see some information from Stats Canada that provides the employment by sectors and subsectors in locally. And here we have two performances for the goods producing sector in London economic regions. And on the right side, we have the services producing subsector in London economic region. From this visual assessment, you kind of are able to see that the services producing sector was more sensitive to the impacts of the two waves of the pandemic so far. We see, for example, the goods producing sector has been shrinking about 14% around June 2020 relatively to the level of employment in February 2020. And then it ended up about 1% more in January 2021, relatively to the level of employment in February 2020. And then on the right side, we see that the services producing sector had about 9% less employment than in February 2020, and it ended up about the same level as it had in February 2020, around January 2021. Now we have to make a distinction here that about 30%, a third of our employment in our regional economy is allocated to the goods producing sector, and about 70% or 2/3 are allocated to services producing sector in our economic region. We progress further to understand more of what was the impact locally of COVID-19 in different subsectors in the regional economy. And you see here a percent change in employment relatively to the pre-COVID level, which would be February 2020. And you see here all the subsectors of the economy, of the regional economy, and how this employment progressed. You see here also a mapping by color, having 4 distinct phases, a react phase whenever we see shrinking in employment trend, and then a restart, which comes always with a switch in the direction of the progress. Usually it's coming immediately after a reaction phase, and then recovery whenever we see a growth in employment, like a persistent growth, several months growth in employment. And resiliency, we marked with that blue color whenever we observed higher levels than in employment than the pandemic, the pre-pandemic, which was our reference point, February 2020. So what we can derive from this map is first that there is quite a variety of impacts that various subsectors have been impacted differently by the COVID-19. The second one, we will see that there are some sectors or subsectors that have been proving to be resilient. And you see here agriculture, the first one, is being marked mostly with the blue color, and then construction, mostly marked with the blue color. Finance, insurance, real estate, rental, and leasing, also marked with blue color. And then partially professional, scientific, and technical services. Again, positive numbers we see mostly during this time since the pandemic affected our life, and then partially educational services, information, culture, and recreation, also having positive numbers over there, and public administration. So basically, this map is allowing us to establish some priority where we should allocate our efforts and where was the most severe impact in the regional economy. Overall, if we look at the regional labor market results, we can see here that the most impact happened in May, June, immediately after the reopening of the economy, after the first wave of COVID-19 pandemic. Employment, again, shrinked about 10% relatively to February 2020. And we are happy to see that today, pretty much in January 2021, we had around 5% higher employment, total employment, than in February 2020. A difference we can see here in this between full-time and part-time. And you see here full-time ended up in January 2021, about 10% higher than in February 2020. In contrast, we see part-time employment ending up about 13% lower than in February 2020. So definitely something happened with this COVID impact in the minds of employers in regard of securing some of the labor force through full-time positions. The other side of the story, which is more dramatic as we look at it, is the unemployment, which more than doubled in June 2020, relatively to February 2020, and ended up or improved since then up to January 2021, when ended up only about 51% higher than in February 2020. This indicates that we still have work to do in this particular, or on this particular indicator of the labor market. The same story is supported by the number of business openings and closings in London CMA, which is a surrogate area, a very good surrogate area for the London economic region. It's a bit smaller, but the available information is only for that area. So we can see again the number of closing raising up to a maximum in April 2020, and then an improvement, a diminishing number of closings as we progress since then up to November 2020. In contrast, we see that the number of openings started to be higher than the number of closings in June, and continued with that up to November, which the available data wasn't ready when we prepared this report, but we assume here that with the second wave and the second shutdown, things have been reversed again, with some closing being, or the number of closing being higher in December than the number of openings, but again, achieving some equilibrium back at the beginning of 2021. Another piece of information that is very useful in us in thinking of what are the priorities in terms of where should we allocate our efforts for the economic recovery is provided by this employment by subsector in London economic region. And you can distinguish in this image that there are about 4 tiers or 4 groups of subsectors based on the size of the total employment in the region. So you can see manufacturing, healthcare, and wholesale and retail are in the first year, with about each having about 15% of total employment. And then we have the second tier with educational services and construction, each about 7 to 8% of the total employment in the region. And then the third one, which is represented here in green, starting with accommodation and food services, about 6%, finance, insurance, real estate, rental and leasing, 6%, transportation and warehousing, 5%, professional, scientific and technical service, 6%. And then the fourth one is represented with smaller and smaller shares, about 3%, of total employment in the region. There are the subsectors printed in gray. So again, that image also helps us to think about what kind of priority should we allocate for our planning, which are the most important um, subsectors on which we should turn our attention first and establish a priority of rotating those as they improve in labor market performance. So our conclusions from for this section, past and present, lead us to the following. The region was most severely impacted during May, June 2020. The labor market overall in our region, in London economic region, demonstrated some resiliency. The regional subsectors were affected directly by the pandemic. We established a ranking across the sectors. We started saying that the services producing sector was more sensitive to the impact of COVID-19 than the good producing sectors. And then we established which were the sectors that demonstrated resilience, and then what are the remaining sectors that have been severely impacted by COVID-19. We also established the fact that there is a ranking of subsectors in a decreasing order of the share of total regional employment. And then since the start of COVID-19 epidemic, numerous job opportunities were posted in London ER at all levels, at all skill levels. And if you allow me here, I can read you from one of my lists here, which were those, a few examples of those jobs. For example, salesperson, home support worker, general office support worker, laborers in processing, manufacturing and utilities, registered nurse, truck driver, material handlers, administrative officer, advertising, marketing, and public relations managers, corporate sales managers, software engineers, developers, professional occupations in business, management consulting, financial auditors and accountants, and so forth. So the list of these are the probably the most frequent positions that appear in job postings in our region during 2020. So there were a few things that had been easy to anticipate. Most likely because there is a logic behind the social isolation and social interaction restrictions imposed by COVID-19, and those logically produce some impact that can be determined from the logic. And I'll start here with a few of those. Definitely it was a big change in the way that people acted vis-a-vis of consuming or shopping, vis-a-vis of leisure, traveling, vis-a-vis of work, and so forth. So definitely this is a big thing that can and wasn't easily to anticipate because of those restrictions. Remote working and teleworking became a very viable work arrangement alternative. Large and resourceful businesses were most likely the winners in this economy because they had the resources, they had some planning done before, they had engaged into e-commerce before the start of the pandemic, so it was easier for them to survive during the pandemic. Again, this remote working creating some issues with many of the commercial estate rented by various organizations, being many of them being empty after this new form of work has been established. Home delivery has been easy to predict as offering new opportunities. Collaboration and community spirit was a test for many communities. The increased need in local superfast connectivity, cloud and security services. Need for networking hardware, teleconferencing software applications, installations and training, an increased demand in project management software, a different role for IT in general in each business establishment, higher demand for digital literacy, online marketing, social media had taken a larger share from the available marketing strategies. And green and sustainability were high priorities in the new knowledge economy. As we had on our list, we were also interested to figure out what were the government supports during this difficult time. We have been amazed about the diversity and the magnitude of this government effort. And you see here that there are at least 4 main areas in which the government has been focusing their incentives, economic incentives, reducing layoffs, rehiring, and job creation. And if you go to this Canada's COVID-19 economic response plan, you can see here that under this particular category falls a lot of names that we already heard, like Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, employment insurance, then mortgage payment deferral measures, and Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit, and Canada Recovery Child Care Benefit, and so forth. So there is quite a long list, which again highlights again the magnitude of this effort to support the economy during this difficult time. Then there were taxes and tariffs. Examples here will be waiving tariffs for certain medical goods and postponing some tax payments as being some measures or incentives in that category. And then we can continue with the financial support loans and access to credit. An example here would be Canada Emergency Business Account, interest-free loans, and then Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy, and loan guarantee and co-lending programs for small and medium-sized businesses, and many, many other examples. Again, the full list will be under this plan that is listed in the slide. And also there were numerous targeted supports for various groups of businesses based on ownership, like minorities or self-employed and others. Furthermore, we were very much surprised of the again, intensity and diversity of regional public supports, many initiatives that you probably will most likely find in the headlines of the local press, have been noticing many initiatives, local initiatives, and we grouped them based on on their main purpose. So one category here is transitioning regional businesses into the knowledge economy. So there will be several programs that have been launched and conducted by Tech Alliance in helping local businesses, again, develop a website through which they could commercialize their products and services. We have Rogers with several projects of installing 5G networks. And then we have very interesting propositions, for example, XR Studio in helping virtual tourism happening in London economic regions, and many other examples like that. Another category that we said we excel locally was sustainable training solutions for the future economy. So we'll see a lot of effort by Pillar Nonprofit Network, City of London, Fanshawe College, Western University, with programs helping people find sustainable jobs. Examples, interesting examples, for example, students from the Ivy School helping local businesses and offering their business expertise achieved through the programs at Western University. Again, consulting and expertise offered for free, helping to go through this difficult time and offering, again, business alternatives and ideas how to make their business sustainable. And many others like that. Another category, financial supports for businesses and core area businesses. You'll see again, City of London, Libro Financials, McCormick Canada coming with different programs supporting buying local, offering different different supports for incentivize people locally to go downtown and support local businesses over there. You'll see, for example, fundraising through Innovation Works Bond, launched by Pillar Nonprofit Networks. Again, an effort to raise some money to support local businesses. Very interesting propositions. And then we have Downtown London associations raising some funding to support or reward businesses downtown sustain their life over this difficult time. And then we have different examples, green economy projects going on, and other initiatives like distribution of food for vulnerable populations. Lots of examples of volunteering going on. So we got to the future, which introduces us to the, again, the planning aspect of this work. So we established the baseline with the present and past, and then we switched the entire attention to engage in this scenario planning method, which requires following a series of very distinct steps. One of these steps is start with an extensive list of uncertainties and external forces that will govern the local economy, and then through several iterations try to reduce that list to a limited number of uncertainties that will help you generate some scenarios. So in our case, through different community conversations with various partners, we have been able to again reduce that list to two major uncertainties based on the impact, immediate impact, and then based on the impact on the labor force particularly. And you can see here, pandemic resolution obviously is something that will stay with us for a while and is unpredictable. Again, we didn't have a vaccine before, but now we have new variants that makes our life difficult, and we don't know exactly what will be offered by the future, but it's still an uncertainty that will govern our geographical area, but also other geographies. On the other hand, there were many, we know that many of our labor market initiatives and programs are dependent on federal, provincial, and local funding. And for that reason, we considered that public support would qualify mostly as being one important uncertainty, particularly due to the length of this of the impact of this these external forces, the pandemic. Many things have been questioned. How long will be able the federal and the provincial governments be able to sustain these incentives and support local businesses and so forth. So that is our second major uncertainty that we selected for this scenario planning. And we see here that varying from low to high, combining these two uncertainties together, we generated a matrix of 4 potential scenarios. So the first scenario is a scenario in which a spread of COVID-19 leads to frequent closures and reclosures of the local economy. Despite these obstacles, ample public, community, and government support maintains the economy above the floating line. Scenario 2 is in which sustainable improvement towards diminishing the effects of COVID-19 is achieved, and stakeholders and decision makers continue to invest in businesses and labor force. The most difficult and dark scenario would be a scenario in which the pandemic worsens due to the lack of effective viral treatment, vaccines, or concurrent pandemics like flus and others will arise, while public support is minimal during due to the lack of financial resources. And then scenario 4, a scenario in which the spread of COVID-19 is under control. Approved effective viral treatments are available, a vaccine is approved, and mass immunizations is underway. However, public support for businesses and labor force is minimal. So these were the resulting scenarios. For each of these scenarios, we went in detail and provided a description of the scenario. You can see here what we already read in the matrix as a description. And then some assumptions have been made whenever we consider these scenarios as an alternative for the future. We provided for each of those scenarios current and projected skills shortages. An example, you'll see that this is a very long section of the report in which we provided different predictions. For example, under scenario 1, since the working remotely will be the work arrangement favored alternative in these scenarios, IT skills will be in great demand. Networking, web development, e-commerce setting, software design and training to use efficiently teleconferencing software, cybersecurity, cloud services, artificial intelligence, etc. Going hand in hand with this, there will be a local need for professionals in ultra-fast telecommunications and internet services provided by the telecommunication companies. Content streaming, gaming, conferencing, Internet of Things, and so forth. As more people will be restrained to spend their time locally due to the traveling restrictions, gaming will become a more popular version of leisure. Game programmers, sales and marketing will be needed. Sports TV, traveling, history channels, video streaming will increase due to the traveling and tourism restrictions and so forth. So there is a quite detailed section on current and projected skill shortages for each scenario. We provided a time frame for each of those scenarios and some light recommendations for businesses in this scenario. For example, keeping applying for and using any relief provided by various levels of government, look at local collaborative alternatives that enhance alliance synergies, find innovation within the firm, promote local shopping, loyalty to local businesses. And we, through different conversations with our stakeholders and partners in the community, we collected suggestions from them regarding of new policies, investments, programs, and supports that will help those businesses operating under each scenario. And you have here an example for scenario one, where we said the health, the pandemic resolution will be low, and then the support will be high for the public support will be high. That is scenario one, and you see here different suggestions that our partners have been helping us with to consider for each of those scenarios. And those suggestions are fairly extensive. So I would conclude here that the report provides 4 potential regional economic outcomes and the resulting planning details. Throughout consultations, the 4 scenarios have been somewhat validated by our community partners. And this work can be helpful in various to various levels of regional planning. We don't say that we provide here a exact recipe, but using those scenarios as guidelines for further conversations will lead to very specific planning for each organization or partner that would be interested in this work. And our recommendation, so across all these 4 lists of policies and investments and programs that have been suggested, all of them have some commonality, and we kind of condense this commonality into things that will provide job opportunities and will help gain business efficiencies from those suggestions. So the first group would be supporting regional businesses, and a focus here was on supporting the small businesses, local small businesses, like providing funding in either wage subsidies or again, some of the costs that are incurred through rents or mortgages or other types of operating costs. If there is support, that will be very helpful to support the local economy and also the labor market locally. Any types of credits that are provided for those small businesses, and retraining the displaced workers would be on or under this category, with a particular focus on several groups like women and immigrants and some other youth and other categories that have been in our attention for a while. And then improve mental health and wellness. So again, put together and promote those mental health and wellness programs that will help us to, again, overcome the difficulties of this social isolation period that we all experience, improve the communication, which will definitely make things easier. Then augmented digital support, provide access to, again, remote areas, but also, again, feasible and reliable access to the networks, to the internet, again, provide security, help small businesses transition to e-commerce, develop local alliances. Another interesting proposition was lending libraries, like lending different software for short periods of times, would be helpful for, particularly for small businesses to again overcome this difficult time. And then education and training, digital literacy, new skills for the displaced workers, a focus on soft skills, and also think about the validated remote training, things that have been certified and proved to be efficient and to be helpful in education and training. Increased coordination between employers and service providers. Another common common theme across those suggestions will be coming from improved communications between these two sides, through again, innovating in the way that we outreach one side for the other, aligned planning with the existing LMI and so forth. And finally, some opportunities will come from community action, push for local buying, again, ask or promote the idea of immigration, local alliances, and achieving local synergies from alliance, charity, volunteering, helping neighbors, family, and friends. So we also, in parallel with this large report that and detailed report that we produce, we also produce a Google Studio dashboard for the community to visualize the progression of the regional economy vis-a-vis of these two major uncertainties. So there were a few indicators that have been selected for, again, the pandemic resolution axis versus the public support axis, and they can be monitored for progression every day. You have here a link where to go and check on this dashboard. I don't want to extend more our conversation about that here. So that was pretty much a quick or brief review of our work on scenario planning in London Economic Region. So I'm now open to some questions if you have, and some answers are about the locations where you can find different pieces that we produced in association with this project, the report, the dashboard, and then where you can find the media recording from the launch at the larger geography for Workforce Planning West coalition. And I'm not yet sure where the larger report is placed, so I don't have a link for that, but I'm sure that Trudy, who was the coordinator, is here attending this session, and she might be able to help us with that. Finally, I have to thank to a lot of project partners that have been helping us to gather all this great information and all the suggestions for different actions that we can do in order to improve the operational environment under each of these four scenarios. So again, many thanks to all our stakeholders and community partners.